Creatures above the tree line. Maybe they live in other parts of the world. I cannot say. I do know you may well encounter them above the tree line in at least two places in the United States. I also know it is unlikely you will ever get the chance to tell anybody you saw them because I would guess they are amazingly efficient at what they do. Is the government aware of them? I don't know. I would guess they would have to be, for the same reason I am aware of them. Let me explain. I'm a tow truck driver, or I am off and on, have been. I've worked now in two locations where the territory included parts of the country which sit above the tree line. Both were along the I-80 highway. What I'm left wondering is whether the owners of the vehicles I'm sent to retrieve encountered these creatures also. And if so, did they survive? There is some evidence which points to the suggestion that there is a cover-up taking place about these creatures. Maybe they have some reason for the government to want to keep quiet about these things. I don't know. The first thing that always strikes me as extremely strange is when I am sent to get these cars or trucks and the owners are never there. Tow truck driver to not encounter the owner of a car or truck which has stopped working is very strange. Sure, not all the people who call us to come and get their cars are there when we arrive. Some of them call relatives and some will call a cab. I would guess even some call Uber and the like, get a fair share of calls from these people under these circumstances. The strange thing is that any time we are called to get a vehicle from an area which is not above the tree line, you can figure about half the time it's going to result in the owner of the car being there when we arrive. This is not the case when I am sent to get a car above the tree line. I have seen things above the tree line which nobody would believe if I told them. It doesn't change the fact that they are there, waiting, and there are a lot of them too. Why our government isn't doing something about them leads me to think that there may be something not even of this planet. Maybe they've made some kind of a deal with our government. I don't know. It's the only reason I can think of why the government is not doing something about these creatures, but it seems they are actively covering up their existence. Of course, I cannot prove any of this. And the only reason I'm even aware of these creatures is that I have seen them in action, and now I know what to look for. And they are everywhere above the tree lines. Along I-80 anyhow. Obviously they have some sort of preference toward higher elevations, but I cannot say for certain they are not at lower elevations as well. But I haven't seen them. The time that I saw them in action, they killed a bear. I know how that sounds, but it is what happened. And it was not a small bear either. I saw it all happen from at first a long distance, and then by the end of the chase, they were very near the highway. It was near sundown when I spotted them coming across the barren plain. And first, of course, all I saw was the bear. And it seemed in a hurry, which wasn't all that out of the ordinary in itself. But the bear also seemed to be stopping momentarily to swipe at something, and then it would continue to run towards where I was at the highway. I was there loading a car onto my tow truck. Now, understand the bear probably covered, I would guess, at least a mile from when I first saw it to when it finally fell dead, about 100 yards from the highway. And by the time it fell dead, the animal was missing both front paws, having been running on stumps the last of its steps. Perhaps the back legs were also stumps. I wasn't at an angle where I could tell. What was clear was that the bear had suffered greatly during that mile or more run toward the highway. And as I watched this all happen in real time, I was terrified by what came to reveal itself as being nearly the entire landscape. And I suppose you may have driven across the country and been above the tree line in parts of your journey. You may remember the ground was often covered with a scrub brush of some type. I have never known its name. They top out at maybe 2 feet, maybe 3 feet in height. I haven't been close enough to one to be able to say more accurately. Well, if you were to watch long enough or to venture out there on foot, though I doubt you would probably make it back, but if you did, you would discover there is something hiding behind nearly every one of those bushes, which I remind seem to be in the millions. However, they are not literally everywhere at all times because I still see some cattle running loose in government ground, which is, to my knowledge, open graze to anyone who wants to put their cattle out there. This is above the tree line. And I do not know what the rate of losses are for their cattle, but some still remain. And my theory is they are staying a jump ahead of the little creatures which have started to inhabit their grazing grounds. And it's also possible that the cattle simply are not a prey that the creatures desire. Or maybe they can't take one down. Maybe their bite doesn't reach high enough above the hooves to make them a threat to cattle. I cannot say. Now, getting back to the bear, it raced across the landscape, appearing to be swiping and swatting at something, and the closer it got, the clearer it became that there was something after it. And then I was able to see them. The reason I had not seen them sooner was because there were so many of them. They literally were the ground moving in unison after the bear. I learned they can roll themselves into a ball and use that as their way of moving at a faster speed as when they are uncoiled. In which case, they turn into, of all things, a slinky. When they become a slinky is where the bear began to stumble. Then finally, it gave in and died right at the end of its race. And I watched them devour the big animal until there was nothing left but what I imagined was a little bit of blood. Okay, maybe a lot of blood, but they ate it so quickly I can't imagine it left a huge stain. Now let me describe what I saw. It had an oval shape, like an egg standing on end, and when it moved, it broke into connected sections, which I can best describe as saying, imagine an oval shape that is a slinky. And it moves like a slinky, only the very front of it is not the same size in circumference as the middle of it, and the very end of it also narrows. Another way to help describe it might be to say, imagine a cucumber cut into equal thin sections, which each was connected so that when one moved, the other also moved with it. Now, the way a cucumber is, it's smaller on both ends than in the middle, and that's kind of the way these things were like. Odd the way the thing moved around, being it moved from one spot to another the way a slinky goes down a set of stairs. Only this thing could go up or down or stay on a horizontal plane. Still, it moved with that slinky motion. What was stranger about it was the way the thing ate, or I am assuming it ate things that were that way because what I could make of it, it could make itself do was to basically become a round shape like a Pac-Man creature. Picture Pac-Man. And it would be in that circular or oval shape, and it could open itself to where it would look like a giant head that was all mouth. You know, the way the Pac-Man used to do when they were eating things. And what it appeared was the way the Pac-Man eats things, and after it would shift to that round or oval shape, which would open up to reveal two halves of a whole, and next it would birth the sharp triangular-shaped teeth that were very much akin to those of the piranha. They were triangular in shape, and they interlocked perfectly with each other when it shut its mouth. So in short, if that thing closed its mouth on something, whatever it closed its mouth on would be completely severed from what it had been attached. The thing could move itself around with half of its body using that slinky effort, while the other half, the top half, or front half, was biting using those razor-sharp, perfectly interlocking teeth. It was impossible not to notice the way the thing would, after completing a bite, as mentioned, thus completely severing whatever was on one side of those razor teeth from what had been attached on the other side, it would then seal its mouth up, and it would stop moving, and it would draw itself in kind of back into its oval or round shape, depending on which one, because both shapes were there. And what it was remindful to me was of someone who had just taken a big bite of something they really enjoyed. You know, the way their face and mouth would move, and maybe they would kind of, tilt their head back and forth a little bit to each side. And they would do that until that wonderful treat was finished being digested. And this took the creatures about 2 or 3 minutes, and then they were back on the hunt again. Another thing or at least anyway, they were through eating. After they were through digesting, they were going to look for somewhere to lay down and sleep it off. I don't know. Another thing that was remindful of piranha was the way that they were in numbers and how they moved like a school of fish. And although they were definitely hostile and aggressive, they were also just as jumpy and quick to run away. However, they would not run far, and to quote a Star Wars line, they will be back soon and in greater numbers. This became apparent to me in the way that they had acted toward the bear during the chase. It explained to some extent why it took them so far and why the bear was able to run such a long distance before they were able to take it down. Quick to shy away from possible injury, it took them that far to find the right places to inject their violence in order to take it down. And I imagined they were biting it on the back parts of its legs and on its paws. And like I said, once it got its mouth around parts of something, it would sever it. It's impossible to guess their bite strength, but suffice to say that whatever it was that they began to attack was quickly bit into bite-sized pieces, which were then kept inside those round bodies until nothing remained. I figure it would have taken them anywhere from 25, 50, maybe 100 bites to completely make a full-size human body disappear and be gone completely. Now, naturally, I do not know if they would attack a human being. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are sure a lot of unattended cars above the tree line. And it might be worth noting that hundreds of thousands of people are reported missing every year just in the United States alone. And I wonder how many of that huge number of people that come up missing had their cars towed from a location which is located above the tree line. The reason I have no idea of whether those creatures are dangerous to human beings is because they terrify me. I will never go near them to find out. You need to imagine the strength of a bear, and it was a full-grown black bear, losing out to a chase which I could only assume started someplace near or maybe below the tree line. And they managed to get it up into the high country where many more were waiting. And the bear, once it realized it was in trouble, I suspect raced for the highway in a desperate attempt to think maybe he could get away from the creatures. Being completely unaware that the elevation might have some effect, the bear probably hoped reaching the highway would be enough to block the creatures from following it to the other side. Had he have known about the elevation, he might have turned around and tried to go back down, but he didn't. I'd be interested to see how that worked out if he would have went back down rather than tried to make it for the highway. I also wonder if he would have been safe if he would have made it to the other side of the highway. Would that have been enough to block those creatures from crossing the highway after it? I don't know. And there may have been more of them waiting for it on the other side of the highway had it have made it. It was in Wyoming that I saw those creatures along I-80. I'm also concerned there are some located further up I-80 when you get into Utah and Nevada. So if you ever find yourself on the side of the road while on I-80, and you're on one of those stretches which has no civilization in close sight, it might be wise to stay close to your car while waiting for help to arrive, especially if you're above the tree line.